Gus Ellery had run the slip registry at Heron's Reach Marina for 19 years, and he knew a lost cause when he saw one. Slip 14 had been a problem since Cal Pruitt signed the lease 3 years back, a 34-year-old with a dead wife, a small boy, and a 1962 fiberglass hull that looked like something a hurricane had already rejected. The hull sat low in the water and smelled of old teak oil and bilge, and every season Gus told himself he'd finally write Cal the notice. He never did. Something about the men made it hard. Cal Pruitt didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't explain himself to anyone. He showed up at the marina before dawn, worked whatever hours the day gave him between dropping his boy at school and picking him up again, and he kept that old hull cleaner than any boat twice its value. Gus didn't know what that was worth. He thought he knew. He was wrong. Holt Reardon arrived on a Tuesday morning in April with 2 men in polo shirts and a rolled set of architectural drawings under his arm. Reardon was the kind of man who wore boat shoes without ever intending to set foot on a boat, tanned, square-shouldered, speaking in the mild, final tone of someone who had already made every decision before he walked in the door. His firm had bought the Heron's Reach parcel in December. The marina was going boutique, 22 slips cut to 14, the working-class registry cleared out, a restaurant going in where the dry storage shed stood now. Gus walked him down the docks himself. He told himself it was professional courtesy. Cal was working a fitting on the hull's stern rail when they reached slip 14. His boy Danny sat on the dock beside him with a book open across his knees, 8 years old and serious-faced, doing what he always did when school was out, staying close to his father without needing to say why. Cal looked up once at Reardon, nodded, and went back to the fitting. Reardon's site manager, a compact man named Steele, looked at the hull the way you'd look at a stray dog in a hotel lobby. "That the 62 you've got registered?" He checked a clipboard. "Fiberglass composite." "Hand-laid," Cal said, not looking up. Steele wrote something. "We're going to need the slip cleared by the 30th. 30 days. He set a folded envelope on the dock. "Condemnation assessment is in there. Hull's listed as non-resale. We had 3 brokers look at the registry photos. You'll get fair market on the slip deposit." Reardon hadn't looked at the boat at all. He was already turned toward the next slip down, talking square footage with his other men. Cal picked up the envelope, folded it once without opening it, and put it in his back pocket. Danny watched him do it. He didn't say anything. He was 8 years old and he had already learned, from some wordless daily lesson his father didn't know he was teaching, that some things didn't require comment. Gus watched too, from the end of the dock. He told himself he felt nothing. The boy's eyes had followed his father's hand the whole time, and Gus looked away. "Get that heap squared away, Cal," he called, because it was easier to say something hard than to say nothing at all. Cal raised a hand. Not agreement. Not protest. Just acknowledgement that the words had landed. The 30 days were almost up when the storm came. It was a late afternoon in May, the sky going the particular greenish-gray that meant the Gulf was about to have an opinion about everyone's plans. Reardon's crew was on site for a measurement survey, and Reardon himself had brought his teenage daughter Paige along, 16, earbuds in, leaning against a piling at the end of the main dock while her father gestured at rooflines with his site manager. Cal was at slip 14 doing what he always did when weather came in, checking lines, covering the instruments, making sure the hull's old canvas was rigged right. Danny was beside him, handing him clips without being asked, the two of them moving around each other in the easy, practiced way of people who have kept the same routines for years. The squall hit faster than the harbor radio had called it. Wind first, then the rain sideways off the water, and the dock went slick in 30 seconds flat. Gus came out of his office at a run. He saw Reardon grab his site manager's arm and pull him back toward the parking structure. He saw Reardon turn to shout for his daughter. Paige was not where he had left her. She had moved to the end of the dock to get a better signal on her phone, and the dock had a gap in its safety rail. Gus had filed a maintenance request on it 3 times, and 3 times it had been deprioritized, and she had gone off the edge in the first gust. Gus heard the splash and he was still 40 feet away. He did not see Cal Pruitt move, because Cal did not appear to decide anything. He was on the hull one moment and off at the next, his jacket gone somewhere, his boots hitting the dock and then the water in a motion so fast and so simple it looked like he had been rehearsing it. What Gus saw instead was Danny. The boy had been right beside his father. He was a step behind when Cal went over the rail, and for 1/2 second he stood at the dock edge in the rain, looking down at the gray chop, and then he went in after the girl himself. Not behind his father. Ahead of his father. Because his father was already swimming hard toward her, and Danny had seen the angle, had seen the current pulling her the wrong way, and had jumped the gap by 4 feet to cut it off. He was 8 years old. Cal reached her first, but only because he was bigger and faster in the water. Danny had already gotten one hand on the back of her jacket and was treading hard to keep her face up when his father arrived. Between the two of them they held her above the surface until the rescue skiff came around from the fuel dock. 3 minutes, maybe 4, but the water was 62 degrees and the chop was running 2 feet and neither of them let go. Gus helped pull all 3 of them out. His hands were shaking by the time they got Danny up the ladder. The boy stood dripping on the dock in the rain and looked at his father, and Cal Pruitt looked back at him, and neither of them said a word. Cal put his hand on the back of Danny's head once. The way you'd steady something you were grateful was still there. That was all. Reardon had reached the dock by then. He was looking at his daughter with the particular expression of a man who has understood, for the first time in some years, what actually matters. Paige sat wrapped in a dock blanket with her knees pulled up, and she was looking at Danny. The storm passed in 40 minutes, the way Gulf squalls do. The sky went clean and the water settled. It was during the quiet after, the dock drying in patches, Gus filing an incident report at his counter, Cal re-rigging the hull's canvas, that the woman with the survey bag came down to slip 14. Dr. Francis Odom was a maritime historian with the Gulf Heritage Coalition, on site that day for an unrelated visual survey of the marina's older fixed-structure pilings. She had been sheltering in the dry storage shed during the squall and had seen none of what happened on the dock. What she had seen, through the shed's south-facing window, was the curve of Cal's hull at low tide, the particular sheer line of the bow, the slope of the cockpit combing, the way the hull sat in the water. She introduced herself and asked if she could look at the bow interior. Cal said sure and helped her aboard. She was inside the bow for 4 minutes. When she came back out, she was holding her phone with both hands, her thumbs already moving. "Mr. Pruitt," she said. "Do you know what you have?" He looked at her. "A boat." She turned her phone to show him. It was a page from the Maritime Heritage Archive, a production record, hand-typed, dated 1962. She pointed at a number in the 3rd column. There were 14 of these hulls laid by hand at the Delamar Yard in Pensacola between March and September of that year. Prototype composite construction, the first of its kind on the Gulf. The yard burned in 1967. All the tooling was lost. She paused. 11 of the 14 have been confirmed destroyed. One is at the Smithsonian in a non-maritime collection, misidentified. One has been unaccounted for since 1974. She looked at the hull. "The plate inside your bow is number 9. Cal said nothing for a moment. "The unaccounted one," he said. "Yes." Gus, standing at the end of the dock with his incident report still in his hand, heard all of it. He looked at the hull he had twice told Cal to get out of his registry, the hull he had watched 3 of Reardon's brokers dismiss from photographs, and he felt something shift in his chest that he did not have a clean word for. The appraisal took 3 weeks. The Maritime Heritage Museum in Pensacola sent their own assessor, then a second one. They consulted the Smithsonian. They pulled the Delamar Yard's surviving invoice records from a university archive. The number they arrived at was $340,000, and the letter that contained it was addressed to Cal Pruitt, and it asked whether he would consider a permanent acquisition with his name on the installation. Reardon's condemnation order, which had named the hull as non-resale scrap with a fair market value of 0, was quietly withdrawn. Nobody made a speech about it. Nobody sent a letter of apology. Reardon's firm sent a revised slip assessment with the condemnation language removed, and Gus filed it in the registry without comment, the way you file something you're glad to have the chance to get right. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in November with the Gulf gone flat and silver, the Maritime Heritage Museum held its acquisition ceremony in the East Gallery. The hull had been transported on a flatbed and now sat under gallery lighting, and the Delamar Yard's production record was framed and mounted beside it with Cal's name on the installation card. Cal brought Danny. The boy wore a collared shirt and stood beside his father with his hands in his pockets, looking at the hull the way you look at something that has been in your life so long you can't quite see it as a stranger would. Dr. Odom spoke. The museum director spoke. Cal was asked if he'd like to say anything and he said no thank you, and that was exactly right. It was afterward, in the gallery's side room over coffee and small sandwiches, that Paige Reardon found them. She was taller than Danny by 1.5 feet, and she crouched down to be level with him in the easy, unself-conscious way of someone who has thought about a moment for a long time and decided to meet it squarely. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "I've been wanting to tell you since May." Danny looked at her. "You didn't think about it," she said. "I've thought about it 100 times since then and I still don't understand it." "But you just jumped." Danny considered this with the seriousness he gave most things. "The current was going left," he said. "Dad was already going straight." Paige looked up at Cal. "He told me that," she said. "Just now, that's the first time I've heard him say it out loud." Cal looked at his son. Holt Reardon was standing behind his daughter, and he had aged some since April, not badly, but the particular aging that comes from having been afraid for someone and knowing why. He put his hand out to Cal, and Cal took it. Reardon didn't say much. He said he was sorry about the envelope, and the way he said it meant he was sorry about more than the envelope. Cal nodded once, the same way he'd raised his hand on the dock in April, not dismissal, not absolution, just acknowledgement that the words had arrived. Gus Ellery stood in the doorway of the side room with a cup of coffee he had forgotten to drink, and he watched all of it. He thought about the 19 years he had run the registry at Heron's Reach, and all the hauls that had come and gone, and the 2 times he had told Cal Pruitt to get that heap out of his books. He thought about the way Danny had stood at the dock edge for half a second in the rain and then jumped without looking for permission. He thought, you can look at something every day and not see it. He thought, the boy learned that from somewhere. He set his cup down and walked back into the gallery, and he stood for a while alone with the hull under the lights, the sheer line he'd passed 1,000 times, the bow that had told nobody its name, and he understood, finally, what it meant to have been wrong about a thing and lucky enough to be standing here to know it. Outside, through the gallery's tall east windows, the Gulf was going gold in the morning light. Cal Pruitt was walking back toward it with his son beside him, Danny's hand in his, both of them moving the way people move when they have nowhere urgent to be and every reason to take their time.